Okay.
Two, one.
That's so short, man. I gotta go do another one. Okay.
Two, one.
Oh, good. It'll just go around and around. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to be hearing this over and over again for a minute, but that's cool.
Two, one.
Okay, but let me maybe do it while I'm waiting here. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is a good one too. Okay, I have to share this for a minute. Okay, I'm gonna roll that one more time, Ross. Sorry. These are shorts that Ross and John Ross or John?
John?
Yeah, what's John's last name?
Schroeder.
Oh, John, of course, John Schroeder. Very cool. Very cool. I love that, man. That sounded so good.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Going to great lengths to not have to learn to play in multiple keys.
I understand that. Let's see. Sorry. I'm getting one more thing together. Hold on. Okay. And I have to go to this and let's see. I don't see any errors. It says there's an error, but I don't see any. Is it that chromatic harp? Dr. Craig Walker wants to know.
That is not that's not, no, that's blues harp. But I was switching them for the different keys, or as that song was modulating.
Yeah.
So, chromatically.
Chromatically speaking. Let's see here. I'm on here. Oh yeah, sorry. Sometimes I forget what I'm doing. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Ross Garren, the 601st guest.
Wow, that's amazing.
You are 601.
I'm in the top 602.
Reg Houston is here. Reg,
Awesome.
Reg says he loves you.
I love Reg. Great guy.
So, um, Ross Garren and I met a long time ago. I don't remember exactly how, but he was playing piano. And do you remember how? It was a long, long, long time ago.
My best guess would be probably when I was at USC and I feel like were a substitute or a special guest, lecturer, that kind of thing. I don't
Yeah,
exactly remember but I feel like
I was a
you came
substitute
and
at
was,
one point.
I feel like you taught one time and maybe I was the accompanist for that, or I don't
Yeah,
exactly remember.
yeah, I think that might have been it. I remember that was a long, long time ago. I was substituting for, I don't know, whoever, uh, yeah, it was some really good teacher, some good singer teacher.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been 20 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then kind of, as you do in LA, you kind of really you don't cross paths a lot actually. So yeah, so Ross and I would cross paths every like few years or something. And then
That sounds right.
more recently, Catherine Bostic surprised me by saying, "Do you know Ross Garren?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then you guys work together a lot. We'll talk about that. But yeah, and then I missed you at the Blue Whale walkthrough. I can't believe I missed you playing. You and John, right?
It was just me,
Oh, okay. Yeah. It must have been after
solo.
Ben played. You were in the main room?
Main room, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it
I
was
mean, they were
probably.
short sets, a half
Yeah.
hour or something like
Yeah, yeah. What Craig Walker says, I think harp players are just looking for an excuse to wear fishing vests.
that.
He's thinking
Yeah.
about it, Craig. So,
It's been a while since I've seen somebody in one of those kind of classic harmonica belts or vests.
so first of all, would you say that, excuse me, would you say that harp or piano that takes the lead right now for you? I was just curious because it's been a while since I heard you play piano.
Um, I would say harmonica for sure, just because um, I think Uh, yeah, harmonica for sure. Although it's an odd question to answer because I think I spend more time playing piano. So I don't know if that's a weird way to answer it, but harmonica is something I think more people think of me for or associate me with. But for a lot of the work that I'm doing, doing production on albums or whatever it is, I'd say piano is harmonica tends to be something um that's thought of in for a solo on one song or a texture on one song on an album, and so I probably end up playing keyboards more, and I still record, or I did, that album I sent you was a kind of a solo piano album
Yeah.
last year. So I think like when I'm just sitting around making music for fun by myself, the piano might be just because you can, sort of uh, be an orchestra, so to speak. It is something I do a lot for pleasure, but I love the harmonica. And I would say most people that think of me in terms of an instrumentalist, probably harmonica at this point. There's also not that many harmonica players, so the
I
kind of
know.
gigs that I'm able to get, are uh, I would say probably at a higher level than where I'm thought of on keyboard, and I pursue harmonica more in that way. Piano, I think I do more what pleases me rather than trying to be a consummate professional.
Right. I love that attitude. By the way, Will Walker, that was the guy who we brought you in, and he does love the way you blow that harp, he said. Even though it didn't really make it on the record, but still,
It happens. It happens.
it's kind of all in the context, right? I mean, as a producer, it's kind of things kind of come up organically, right? Like in the moment, you might change, or some combination of people might bring out something, or kind of demand something else, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think I get to work on a fair amount of projects as you know, playing harmonica on them, and I it's funny. I feel like I've been lucky to work with a lot of really great, successful people, but because I'm just sort of generally, not always, but generally coming into play, on something, I kind of have very little insight into what might happen, you know, after that, like I always
Yeah.
am curious, like, what's the rest of the process? And obviously I, get to produce records and stuff like that as well. But, a lot of the time I'm just like, man, I wonder how that became that, and I missed all of it.
I know. Well, as a hired side person, that's what happens. Yeah, that's happened to me too. It's just you come in, somebody wants you on the project, you come in, you do it, and then it doesn't happen. And yeah, it is kind of interesting to consider, like, what if you knew what the rest of the project sounded like? Would it change the way that you play or sing, yeah.
I think one thing for me too is, having worked on a lot of stuff over the years, every once in a while somebody will ask me like, "Oh, you're on this record. Like, what what was it like recording with so and so?" And I'm like, "Ah,
I don't
I
know.
really wish I knew, man. I just, I saw he was playing drums on the project and I got excited too, but I didn't. Yeah, it was just I didn't get to interact with anybody but, the producer or the artist or something,
Yeah. Do you ever,
Yeah.
I've experienced kind of the weird thing of, I would guess because I'm not in the studio all the time, and pulling people in and experiencing different sounds. But I have, as a producer, gotten a band together, and then in the studio, it did not sound as good as the people sounded live. And I kind of wasted the money a little bit, because I didn't know. I thought live they were, you know, very strong, but then in the studio something changed. And it might have been the
Mm.
combination of people, or it might have just been the person themselves, you know, not not 100% comfortable with the recording process. Have you ever gotten into a situation
Um,
like that?
well, I don't think I've ever produced a band, I have produced albums for solo artists and then we would put together groups, and I've been a part of um the hired band for people where I wasn't producing as well, just sort of brought in for to record on that project. So I can't say I've ever like had the experience of seeing a band live and then going into the studio with that band and having that issue. I have certainly had that issue that you're describing with particular players,
Yeah, yeah.
like where you had a specific impression of what it would be, and it was not that. And I haven't. I feel like most projects I've worked on, uh, if you're getting a certain type or caliber of musician with a producer or artist that's, kind of reasonable and uh, good at what they do, probably I feel like most of the time things get wrangled into shape. It may
Yeah.
not have been capturing lightning in a bottle or just from the first note it was perfect, but normally it seems to me, things would get troubleshot and not be a problem. But yeah, I've definitely experienced some odd things, the way people's brains work, especially, musicians and creative people are it's really fascinating. I remember one thing that sticks out to me is this great piano player I made a recording with at one point in time, and he was playing all of this amazing, really unique, just gorgeous stuff, right? And like super high level, impressive, cool, beautiful way of articulating and expressing this songwriter's music on the piano. And I was blown away. And then the producer asked him just to play like the chords as quarter notes on the chorus of a song we had just done a couple takes. And it's like his brain melted. It was like the producer had to come out and do it, and he was not a keyboard player. So there are odd things like that where this guy, like, I guess when
Oh,
he was
wow.
playing in the intuitive way, it was this stunning thing. And then what I would consider kind of like the most boneheaded, kind of chunking out the chords, it like, I think there's like having to think about it or something. It wasn't that he didn't want to, he just, you could, it's just like it short circuited his brain or something. So I have seen things like that have surprised me.
Yeah, yeah.
um
Yeah, I've seen a few situations where I enjoyed the eclecticness of the musician, brought them in, and they got straight. And
hmm,
it was like, I don't want you to be straight. I want your
hmm,
eclecticness. That's why I brought you in, you know. And one guy, I mean, one guy didn't really get with the program, so I had to get a different drummer. And then one
hmm.
guy just fell right in. It was like, oh, he said, I could play really out on this, but you probably don't want that. And I said, no, I do want that. I want you to go for it. So yeah, it's interesting. It's really, as we know, being a creative artist is really, it has so many layers, it's which the significant layers are personality and what you think of yourself and what you don't think of yourself and all of that kind of stuff. It's really
Yeah,
interesting.
and I think different guys have different attitudes. Some guys are really like studio players, and others
Yeah.
are live players. And I've met phenomenal, highly sought after drummers that are thought of as some of the best you could get, and they're not comfortable playing with a click, for example. It's just not
Yeah.
something they like doing, which always seems odd when you're dealing with somebody who's, some
Yeah.
of the best players' favorite drummer, and he doesn't feel comfortable with that. And I think, like, especially for me, working in LA, I'm doing a lot of film score stuff and TV and library things and artist records, and I think that's a certain type of uh, studio player attitude that might be different from um, making jazz records and that kind of thing. So it makes sense to me that sometimes guys want to play something that they know is safe, will work, and like in TV and film, I think that's the ticket a lot of times is how quick and efficient you can be at getting something serviceable that does the role, and not every project has the luxury to take risks or take the time to
Yeah.
explore things. So I kind of understand that from, and I think different guys, in the environment people set up, like producers and composers set up to encourage different,
Yeah.
sides of
Yeah.
things also,
Yeah.
definitely a
Yeah. Yeah.
factor.
Yeah. Absolutely. What did that make me think of? Oh, yeah, it made me think of Mike Lang. Did you ever know Mike Lang?
I mean, I certainly know of him, but
Yeah.
I never met him.
He was very unique. I mean, in all the years I've been here and all the playing I've done over the years, I wasn't really a studio singer very much because I just I just didn't, that was just not my path really. But and Mike was like first call studio, but why, part of why at least, was he could look at the music for, like never having seen it before, and the first time he would read it perfectly and put artistic expression in. So it was, I mean, you just don't see that so much, and
Yeah. And
yeah,
I think you do see like a handful of guys who are premier studio players and really great unique artists,
yeah,
and like marquee soloists and stuff. But I would say, like, as a rule, that's they're not normally the same guy, right?
yeah,
The person whose record you want to buy is not normally the, you know,
the
the same
studio
guy as
player
who's,
guy, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But a few guys have been blessed to be everything.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Hi, Taylor. Um, uh, was there a moment in time that you suddenly noticed that um, that, let's see, how shall I say this? So you as a young person growing up and playing, you were probably going, I'm guessing, probably more towards expressing yourself as an artist. And then was there a point actually where you you started noticing at least that that should I say I don't know what to call it, the business was coming in more like as a producer and all of these things as a player on records and film scoring and blah blah blah. So was there a point where you began to notice like, oh, not that you dropped your artistic thing, but that you noticed that that kind of action was coming into your life?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, um I have probably done a lot of different things in music over the years, and everything from touring to local club and bar gigs to you know MDing, wedding band things, to writing film scores for indie films, or even, actually I did some network shows as well, and doing library music, taught obviously, and recorded on a lot of things, and done some producing. So I've done kind of like a lot of things, which I think is pretty normal for my peer group to have at least had a variety of different opportunities come their way. And I would say for me, um, definitely, um, I think it is partially about matching what you're excited about and are driven and inspired to go after, with at least some amount of ability or willingness to work on it. In that, I think a lot of guys maybe could really do certain jobs well if it suited their personality, but maybe it's just not, something they want to do, um, or love. And I have found most parts of the business to be pretty competitive. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be able to make your living as a musician. So, um, it is a fun and varied and an exciting field, and I found most of the sectors that I've been in pretty competitive. Like, guys that really do wedding gigs. I mean, that's an impressive skill set. Studio players is the same. Touring's its own thing. Teachers, if you're going to be competitive, at least in a market like LA, I don't know about other places because I haven't really lived in other places as a professional, but there's like great people, doing all those things. So I think for me, um, I grew up like maybe in middle school, starting in middle school, playing. I got into harmonica, blues harmonica, and then as I kind of moved through the end of high school and college years, and a few years after college, I pursued music. I got a degree in music composition, classical composition, and at least at that time, I'm not sure exactly what the environment is like now, but you couldn't study harmonica in college, really. I think
I can
maybe like one
imagine.
or two guys had done it because, yeah,
Yeah,
it wasn't a
it
program
wasn't
you
a
could be
serious instrument
admitted.
or something.
Well, I think there just weren't like a teacher that would be, you know, on faculty at an accredited
Yeah,
university, and same with even in high school, big band was kind of like how I experienced jazz and jazz education was playing in the high school big band.
yeah, yeah.
And and so my high school teacher was really cool, Rob Clevin, great guy. He would like carve out a little spot for me to play harmonica on a song maybe or something like that here and there, but basically there was no section
Yeah.
kind of work. And so I kind of ended up focusing a lot more on well, I'd say I ended up focusing exclusively on keyboards and composition for the end of high school through college and a little ways after college. So I'd say for me, things really picked up in a noticeable way when I got back into harmonica, probably in my mid 20s. I just kind of rekindled my love for it, and it was pretty organic in terms of starting to find opportunities that were I guess you're kind of describing more commercial or like legitimate work, it kind of happened somewhat naturally for me, at
Yeah,
that time.
yeah,
And like a lot of the other stuff I've done has felt like it required more hustling to find opportunities.
yeah,
And that one, not that I haven't worked at it, but it felt like there was demand for it to some degree. I had an ability to do some of that work, well enough, and it's kind of just kind of continued on from there.
yeah, yeah. Um, so some of you listening know Catherine Bostick and her work, and she's a good friend of both of us. And she's a film scorer, piano player, songwriter, singer. Um, she had a long career being a jazz piano player and singer, and then got into film scoring. And Ross and she worked together a lot. How did you meet Catherine?
I met Catherine, I believe, she was scoring, um, I think scoring is the term you would use. She was doing the music, like I want to say interstitial music, for a
I'm sorry,
play
what
that
was that word?
interstitial. I'm not sure. Let's look that one up. I might not be using that one
I
correctly.
don't, I've never heard that word. What is it?
Let's look it up. Let's make sure I'm
Okay.
using interstitial. Occurring in or being an interval or intervening space or segment. Yeah, so like the music at the beginning of an act of a play. Like this wasn't a musical.
Oh, yeah.
This was an August Wilson play
Oh, yeah, yeah,
um, that Felicia Rashad was directing,
yeah.
and Catherine, I think was hired. I did see the play, and this is going back quite a ways, and I don't totally remember, but I think it was basically interstitial music, music that would be at the beginning and end of scenes, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think there was underscore. Anyway, she um, uh, was doing something with a very small ensemble for this. It was percussion, like washboard and other kinds of uh, percussion instruments in that kind of world, and then like slide guitar, banjo, and that kind of like acoustic, rootsy guitar.
Mhm.
And I guess she was either looking for harmonica or just the guitar player Andrew Sinowick, who's
Yeah.
awesome,
Yeah. Yeah.
incredible
Yeah.
guy. He recommended me, and I'm not totally sure if he was just a good buddy and upsold me to her, or if she actually asked if somebody knew a harmonica player. But so I met her, and that was a really fun session, and we've kind of continued collaborating on her projects off and on over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. So we produced a record on her, I don't know how many years ago, 6 years ago or something. It was before the pandemic, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, I have a vague recollections of maybe it being mixed during the pandemic. I vaguely recall
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
to Dave Way's house during the pandemic and having some protocols about that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
so 5 or 6 years
record,
ago sounds about
yeah,
right.
the record is not out, but it's really an incredible record. And Ross did a lot. And I'm trying to think of the other guy's name,
Oh, Nick DePina.
yeah, yeah, Nick DePina. And so, yeah, it was really interesting and good project. And the music is fantastic. I know at the time I called it what did I call it? I called it cinematic Americana. It was really an interesting and very inviting. It wasn't just tied into one little genre. So
Yeah, right, right.
I hope it comes out at some point, whenever.
Yeah, me too.
Let's see. My friend Taylor Hatch is here. He's a guitarist, and he comes up with some good questions. I'm just kind of looking at the questions because he poses these questions, and then I pick. Um, well, let's see. Um, well, here is a good question for you. For yourself as a composer, what kinds of inspirations do you draw from when you write music?
Um, I'm I think super eclectic. I every once in a while I look at like a really developed artist with a branded sound and a fan base they need to be concerned about alienating and that kind of thing. And I appreciate the fact that I just kind of get to do whatever I want. I don't have
Yeah,
a lot you know
restrictions.
that's yeah, so for me, sometimes it's an instrument. I have a ton of funky old keyboards, weird harmonicas, things like that. Sometimes that instrument or combination of instruments might be a source of inspiration, particularly funky old electronic instruments or getting into weird prepared pianos or things. Sometimes just the sound of something like that is inspiring or evocative, and so that would be one thing. I mean, I do just kind of go through different phases that I get excited about. At one point in time, I made a project that was really inspired by exotica music, and it was a really dense, kind of heavily orchestrated thing. The record
I'm sorry, I'm
that I
interrupting
sent to
you.
you.
What? I've never heard the term exotica music.
Yeah,
What does that mean
well,
exactly?
like Um, I guess it would be sort of a genre I associate most with a guy named Martin Denny. Um, and it's
Martin?
sort of you would know it if you heard it, like tiki bar music, kind of, kind of this sort of eclectic um, genre of music that has a lot of, I guess, what are supposed to be evocative sounds. You might even hear people making fake bird and monkey noises with, vocally. You'll have in this. Now, I was just inspired by the genre. I didn't really like try to do, that genre, a sound alike to that genre, but a lot of instruments together that are not part of um, a standard ensemble, in terms of colorful percussion, vibraphone, piano, strings, I guess another thing would be like lounge music acts of lounge music, uh, and space age is another term I think is thrown around there. Yeah. Are we? I'm not sure if we're still connected here or not.
Yes, we are.
Oh, cool, 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 cool. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, but I, have done. Yeah, Juan Esquivel is a really big composer for. I don't know if you'd call him exotic, but it's kind of like that genre to me anyway, except on steroids. That's, people singing za 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 za, that kind of zone, like very colorful theremins maybe are going to be in there, electric harpsichords, not unlike some Brian Wilson type arrangements. Just colorful studio out, an orchestra panned left and an orchestra panned right, enjoying stereo, that kind of colorful stuff. So yeah, I will find myself getting inspired by that, but I've also been inspired by tape loop pieces, you know, Fripp and Brian Eno and guys like that. I've enjoyed, kind of making projects inspired by jazz standards, the American Songbook. So it's for me, it's pretty eclectic. What gets me excited? The album, the solo piano album I sent you, Freezing and Thawing Variations. That was uh, the idea of trying to really create a concept album themed around the sonic implications of winter, as I saw it, or me and the guys I was collaborating with on it, and that was a really cool album. I haven't done a lot of music sort of inspired by an extra musical idea, something like Winter. A lot of the things that have
Yeah,
inspired me have been music,
yeah,
and in
yeah.
this case it was, that, so kind of I get excited about all kinds of different things.
How about if we listen to um, one of your solo? Let's see. This is the Magnetic Vines, but um, the solo one is
Well, that
which one?
Magnetic Vines, that's a duo project. So, and that's pretty much what I've been putting out most of my what I, would call artistic music in recent times. So that album you had up is basically just me playing solo piano, and with some additional sound design and, production work from a friend. So I think of that as
Um,
solo music.
and so which song should I listen to?
Um, I don't know. It's they're all my children. Maybe Crystal Lattice might be a fun one.
Okay. All right, we're listening, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, how pretty. You know,
You know, it's funny. I was just gonna say I realized I just suggested we listen to that one, and I don't know why I picked that one. I just know that's, one of the ones that sounds a little less weird. And so it seemed like a reasonable starting place. But after the question about composition, I'm really realizing that was a free improvisation. So I also will just enjoy doing stuff like that, and I enjoyed and felt free improvisation for me is a mixed bag. It's something I do like to do from time to time, but it definitely feels like there's some great mysteries involved in terms of getting good results. Especially, I'm not, you know, somebody who exactly has the world at my fingertips when I sit down at the piano. I have to pace myself and try to make music within what I've got, and having an album of music where I'd say I think about half the pieces were composed
yeah.
and uh, and set like a pretty specific sound world and note density precedent and just kind of a textural precedent that I felt like I kind of knew how to improvise in a way that was going to be successful for me on that album, because in that case, I had a number of composed pieces and a mindset that I was firmly in. So I also kind of get into, thinking about things that way as well. And yeah, there you go. That's a prepared piano with some funky effects, and I found that sound inspiring. And then I had kind of a concept of spaciousness and starkness that kind of fit the album, the composed material from the album, and I was kind of able to just sort of go with that.
Yeah, and right. That's interesting because um well, to me it just speaks of um your being the kind of creative musician who is aware of the moment, you know, and how important the moment is, and which, you know, right, which is hugely important in even in music that has already been written and structured. It's still about the moment. Um, you know,
There
even the
there
great.
are some things in free improvisation that I can't achieve very easily with written music,
Mhm.
and vice versa. So, I think for me, as I'm continuing to develop, that's definitely on my mind, is how to use the strengths of certain approaches or ways of working and kind of at least avoid the pitfalls for me, that come with that. And there is something very special about a free improvisation that goes well.
Yeah. Yeah. That goes well. Right. I was talking to Garth Powell. Are you familiar with Garth Powell?
I'm not, no.
He's a wonderful percussionist. He heads up the Open Gate Theater, if you've ever heard of that. It's like for the last
I'll have
25
to check it out.
years. Yeah, Open Gate Theater it's a theater that was started by a guy named Will Salmon and Alex Klein. You probably know the Klein brothers, right? Nels and Alex.
Sure, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I've seen him play.
yeah, so anyway, for years they had the first Sunday of the month in Eagle Rock at this community center. Creative free music. They'd have two groups on that Sunday, and anyway, it continued into the Open Gate Theater. Will passed away last year, and Garth Powell and the bass player whose name I can't think of, wonderful bass player. Anyway, they have carried on the Open Gate Theater, and Garth also is like renowned in the sound industry. He's developed speaker systems, or I can't quite fully remember, but he's also a really wonderful percussionist. And so why did I bring him up? Because we were talking, it was something that you said. Sorry, I went off on such a tangent that I forget what you were saying.
Was it
What were you
free
saying?
improvisation is kind of what we were talking about, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. So he and I interviewed him, and um, I mean, I've improvised for years, but I always wonder, like, when I see the community of improvisers here, they seem to, for the most part, be very solid in their presentation and their creativity. And so we were talking about that, and he said, well, there's good moments and bad moments, good players and bad players. And yeah, but he said, anybody can have a good moment or a bad moment. So, yeah, but, so anyway, I just wanted to mention that. You
It's
said,
it's it's a dark art for me, for sure. Definitely shrouded in mystery, and I will go through periods. Um, it maybe be different if I really made like a daily practice of doing that, but I
yeah,
don't. I go through periods where maybe I'm doing it more or less, and I will within that go through periods where I feel like I'm on to something. Like I kind of sit down and have a point of view that I can express effectively, and then I will like lose that clarity that I have at that particular time in you know era, couple days or weeks or whatever, and I'll kind of, I think what it is too is as a someone who I think I work in a lot of different genres just in a attempt to be employed and do say yes to cool stuff that comes my way. That kind of you know can have the downside of you find yourself sort of with too many options, right? Like you can kind of go in a lot of different directions that you're at least somewhat versed in. I think that's true for most like studio LA player. I would say that's kind of the stereotype to me. It's kind of like pretty good at a lot of stuff, not really like great at anything necessarily. Not, like that's kind of the,
yeah,
at least to me, a stereotype. Or like pretty great at everything, but not like
yeah,
elite at everything. And so I think sometimes having, like I said on that album, I really benefited from uh, my collaborator. I had two collaborators on there, a sound designer and engineer named Keith Armstrong, and then my partner in the Magnetic Vines, Eric Myron. And that album was basically me playing solo piano versions of some of his winter themed guitar pieces, and having a set of music that, technically speaking, was not a stretch for me, in terms of the way that he translated those, or we translated together the piano versions of his guitar pieces. When we put it on the piano, that was within my means to play comfortably. And then the aesthetic of the set was pretty set, and so it created this situation where I kind of felt like I knew what I was doing, even if I was improvising freely, which is often not the case. Sit down and like, gosh, where do we go? So it is probably a muscle that the guys that do it all the time in a variety of settings, especially, I guess, if you're interacting with people. Most of the free improvisation I've done, not exclusively, but mostly it's solo by myself, and I'm not really receiving input from other people. So I'd say that's probably a pretty different thing too, than when you're interacting with people,
Yeah,
other
I think
musicians.
improvisation is it's amazing because you have to listen and you have to leave space, but you also have to be, I don't know what the word is, outspoken. I mean, you have to move forward with, you just have to move forward, not thinking about it, but move forward, put it out there, and listen and leave space and put it out there. And, so it's a really interesting thing. I had this group, Fish to Birds, which was six, usually six a cappella voices. We sang together for 8 or 9 years. And there were some quote unquote rules that we got into, not really rules, but you know, you'd hear somebody, you could harmonize with them, and that it wasn't just one person, any number of people can come in and harmonize, duplicate what they're doing, branch off, it was a very interesting experience, really good. I really enjoyed it. Um, there's a lot going on right now with circle singing, which I think is close, but not really that. It's one person directs people like, okay, I'm gonna do ba ba da do da da do da. I want you to do that, then keep doing it, and you do ba da da da. So I'm building it up. I'm writing it basically, but so that's not really improvisation, right? It's something else, but it engages it engages a lot of people. It gives a lot of people the ability to actually participate in something like that, whereas they might not be experienced or able to do that themselves. But improvisation, yeah, it's plus improvisation as a life model, a life, you know what I mean, is an incredible tool. It's great. I mean,
Yeah,
we
right.
improvise all the time. We may not think about it, but we're always improvising, in life.
Yeah, and I think, like, for me too, there's an excitement in, I've kind of marveled at how, I would say, like, a lot of my favorite players are probably pretty much like the premier guys on their instrument. Not necessarily like the most technically premier, but a lot of them that are my favorites are among the best, that to ever do it, just from a technical standpoint. Obviously, they're my favorite, so I consider them the best in a variety of ways. But I'm always impressed that, like, for example, a guy of Meldau or Keith Jarrett, or like these kind of guys who I would say are probably like about as premier on the instrument just technically. Maybe there are other guys that are a notch above, I don't know, but those guys are crazy good at their instrument. And it blows me away that I they and Herbie would be another one who's just so good, and it seems like they consistently they push themselves to the point of, like, it's not executing something that's worked out. It's like by pushing to the limits, and being into some unexplored territory. You're creating a moment where everyone is hyper listening. There's all these things that can happen. There's going to be little, even if you're a premier technician, there's going to be little flubs and things like that because you don't know what you're doing. If you worked it out, you wouldn't have those flubs because you're so good. But like, that's actually not the mentality I think that's happening, at least on a lot of my favorite recordings and favorite players. They're constantly like searching for that moment, and that brings the audience with them in a way because you can feel like that excitement. I think improvisation, you know, uh, you just kind of creates these moments of excitement and anticipation and, hyper awareness. And, I think that's how I think about composing a lot too, is it's like getting an idea of something I haven't heard that I'm kind of interested to track down and see what that is. So I have that similar kind of interest in like, what is this going to be? Because otherwise, maybe I would just put on a record of some music that already does the thing that I know that it is, that I want it to be, or something like that. So it is interesting. I don't think about it much, improvisation. I probably should think about it more, but I am in agreement with you that it's a uh, very special. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm just going to throw this in there too. That particular song, I actually heard, I felt that I could actually write lyrics to that song. Even though it was very slow, there was this melody that I was drawn to. That's how I usually know what I want to write lyrics to. I hear this
Oh,
kind of a melody. For me, it ties in to, my heart, and there's some kind of a flow to it that I can jump on. So if you have any music like that, I'd like to try. But also, I was going to say,
awesome.
Chick Corea. I was listening to Chick yesterday. I just got an urge to listen. I listened to the Triad Trios, I think, and it was so great. And Chick was so incredible on so many levels. And he, you know, as he did a lot, he got the audience to respond, and it was an up-tempo standard. And there was a point where I got chills, from this interaction. You could feel the audience, was like everything was heightened. I mean, to give that to an audience, through music, and it was improvisation. He was soloing, but he was taking a little line. He'd have the audience do it. And
Hmm.
yeah, so Chick and Kenny Werner's another, you know,
I think
incredible.
that's it for me. Like Chick's a perfect example too of just a guy who's like about as premier as it's ever been on the instrument, but like, and I guess he did perform classical music on occasion, and had the chops to do it, but that actually there's a different thing that he's after live, and
Yeah.
that is really special. And it's interesting another thing about free improvisation with me. It's funny we're talking about this a lot because I don't really think about it all that much, and it's not necessarily a huge part of, well, maybe it is, I don't know. That feels like it's not a huge part of what I do, but I think I studied composition in school and have written a lot of music, and so obviously those two, free improvisation and composition, can be sort of at odds with each other. And I think for me, that's one element. And then another is that I think I enjoy some really weird stuff, but for the most part, my taste leans towards things that are somewhat pleasant to listen to. But I mean, I guess different people consider things pleasant, but something that's a little tonal, something that's not. I have pretty eclectic tastes, but I guess what I'm getting at is that in free improvisation, it's certainly a high mark to achieve something, for me anyway, that sounds like it is a song to a degree, or it sounds like it has a composed through thread.
Right.
Um, that's certainly a not what all of the improvisations need to be about, but that's certainly a something I do go after. And maybe instead of it being as structured in terms of repetitions and things, it's a little more organic in terms of motifs and harmony and things kind of spinning and evolving. And, I guess subconsciously you're keeping track of some sense of an architecture. And so for me, like, again, not being at Chick or Keith or these guys' level of skill, I have to kind of keep track of like when I feel like I'm at a high point that I probably am not going to be able to get that much further without blowing the whole thing. You know what I mean? I feel like in my mind, some of these other guys can go infinitely. So for me, I kind of have to like pace myself to make sure that I finish the marathon still like, on both feet, and that it comes off as a nice piece of music.
Yeah.
But so that's one part. And then also, trying to stay within a sound world that I enjoy, it had not be so impulsive as a improviser that I kind of end up in a world that I don't have the chops to explore. Like I definitely know there are guys who can move into these other zones. They understand 12-tone music. They understand all kinds of different vocabularies really well and can improvise. But for me, I haven't really necessarily developed such a wide palette that I also kind of feel like I sort of need to work with what I've got if I want it to be really good music and not just weird.
Yeah, yeah.
For
I
me
think
at
that's
this point,
good.
hopefully I can develop. Yeah.
I think that's actually a good way to look at it. I don't think you're, I don't think there's something more that you need to feel like you have to get to. I think that's it. And within that, there's growth, but I don't think it needs to be this. I think this is great. It's kind of like, the old Japanese garden in their backyard that's this big, and okay, create this whole world there. And then they do. It's
Mm,
amazing,
right.
you know. I think Keith is really good at composed through. It's like he has this space that seems to be simple and empty, and I mean it's not simple because he's not simple exactly, but the space itself is not cluttered, with ideas, oh, I should be this or whatever. I think he has this composed through. You know what, one thing that blew my mind, I heard, his last concert. I don't think it was, but it was in Japan with Jack DeJohnette and uh, who's the bassist? Um, you know, his usual
Gary
bassist.
Peacock or
Yeah, Gary Peacock. So I had never heard this particular thing from Keith. I don't know if it was because I hadn't just sat down and listened for this on albums. I don't know why, but anyway, all his solos were made up of three motifs, and then you take this motif and make it develop it into a new motif, and then three, take this, three, three, the whole entire song. I was so
wow.
blown away because it was totally artistic, and he did, and I just thought, how long did that take, to become artistic at that? I mean, yeah, I do that, within my solos and stuff, but to do it with such concentration, or I guess you can call it concentrate, focus, I don't know, and art. I mean, it was just really blew my mind.
Yeah, he's incredible. He's incredible. I'll look forward to list tracking that recording down and hearing that.
Well, it was live. I don't know if it's a recording, but but maybe it was at towards the end, because I mean, at the end of his performing. It was supposed to be one of his last performances. I just happened to be in Japan at the right time. It was really
Hmm.
cool. Um, yeah, I there was a question that Taylor had. Yeah, this is kind of interesting, Taylor. Um, outside, okay, outside of music, have you noticed anything about yourself that you've been wanting to uncover? Say, for instance, that you've been trying to avoid certain pitfalls that have stagnated your creative process. Welcome to the world of Taylor Hatch.
Uh,
He's got
I love
good
it.
questions.
I yeah, I try to avoid any amount of introspection in my private life. I try to just have no introspection whatsoever. No, I'm kidding. So what is that question? So things in
Outside of
outside
music,
of music
have you
that
noticed
limit
anything?
creativity.
Yeah, yeah, yep. Basically, that is correct. Certain pitfalls that
Um,
have stagnated your creative process.
just obviously, I have not encountered this question before. Not obviously, but I have not encountered this question before, so I'm just gonna uh freestyle. Some things I've noticed is that I think my musical world and career is pretty eclectic, and so I can find myself feeling like I'm getting surface level at a variety of different things, and maybe not getting as deep into some things as maybe would yield really creative. Um, I think there's a lot of value to having uh, like a bird's eye view of a lot of different things. You're exposed and have some concept that all kind of come together. But I do think that sometimes, when I, for example, am practicing harmonica more regularly and for more time, it's just an infinite world of possibilities in there, on the instrument. I think also within styles. Um, it's the same thing. So I would say that that is something that I grapple with between playing different instruments.
Does
The
that
harmonica
does
for me,
Sorry, does this reflect in non-musical things as well? Because his question was outside of music. Have you noticed anything about yourself that you've been wanting to uncover? But you know how the same lessons apply in music, in life, in all the aspects of your life. So I'm just curious if what you're talking about actually applies to something outside of music as well.
it does, and but I do think I forgot the prompt there midway through describing how I felt. It just basically, um, as a human being, a little lack of focus
Yeah,
on just like, hey, here are the three things that are important to me in my life right now. Whether it's like this one musical thing, this thing with my health, this thing with my
yeah,
living situation, whatever it is, kind of not. That would be one thing. Avoiding the sort of like cursorily touching on 20 different things and not
yeah.
really uh, getting, you know, super deep into a thing at a time, or something like that. I think lack of focus a little bit would certainly be one thing. Um, uh, Outside of music that hinders creativity. I'm having trouble. Maybe you can lead me a little bit, because I'm having trouble. I
Yeah.
just keep thinking about things that are more specific to how I would
Music.
work as a musician.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know. Let's see. I'm
uh,
trying to think of, I mean, this is just, I think this comes from Taylor's desire to kind of figure out how life works or moves along better. He graduated from UNT, and there was a lot of personal growths and challenges that happened while he was at school. So for him, I think he focuses on how your personal point of view reflects into your music. How does your personal growth affect your creativity?
I can certainly say that I have observed my personal growth affecting my music positively. A lot of things that I once cared about, maybe as I've gotten older, like something that was important to me, I'll at one point I'll think about it and be like, wow, that doesn't even register for me now.
Yeah.
I think certainly, um, uh, as yeah, it's so difficult for me to think of it outside of music, but I do think things about self-confidence, perspective, and perhaps trusting yourself and um, your view on things. I don't know if that necessarily is something that would globally. I mean, there's a great history of terrible human beings who have sucked at life or been horrible people making astoundingly good music. So I'm not sure that this is exactly like a one to one, but
Yeah.
um, certainly for me, I have one of the things that as I've evolved, I realize is like, some guys just know how to do it. And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily that they're the fanciest or they have the best ears or they have the best anything. They just kind of like bring, um, they just know what they're doing, and they have a perspective and an approach that works and is effective. And I imagine at least a lot of that interfaces to some degree with your sense of self-confidence, knowing where you stack up, and not in a competitive way necessarily, but just like knowing what you can do, knowing what
Yeah.
you can do for people, knowing how to be effective, and not feeling um, one way or the other about things that everybody's always working on their stuff. Um, and So I would say that's definitely something that I've noticed. In terms of personal growth, just feeling the more comfortable I felt kind of just as a human being over the years, I think that's translated to having a better sense of how to be an effective musician. Like well, we were talking about free improvisation, and I think that that's a good example where when you sit down, you could potentially do anything that comes to your mind, and it's uh, kind of a lifelong pursuit to figuring out, you know, if you've practiced all this stuff, you've learned all this stuff, like how do you actually go about doing something that's meaningful to you or the people that you are working with or have hired you. And I would say that's definitely a thing. I think as I've gotten older, I would say I appreciate health more than I did when I was younger. Certainly, I'm not sure how that affects creativity, but I certainly see that the longer you can keep yourself feeling good, probably the more you'll be interested in doing anything. And Yeah,
Okay. That's a good that's a good answer.
yeah, not one I think too much about music and not enough about the rest of life.
No, that was actually perfect for an answer. I know kind of how Taylor thinks, and yeah, that's good. I wanted to play that. I wanted to play that. The cut on um, your 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 website of you playing harmonica because that shows something cool of you playing harmonica.
You know what? Here's another one. I don't know if this is.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think as I've gotten older too, I mean, you know yourself better, but I find myself leaning more and more into eccentricities and impulses that I have, in terms of, uh, mostly in terms of music, but in other ways too. I think as I've gotten older, I've realized there's a lot of uh, value in just kind of pursuing whatever your interests are and sort of bucking or not paying that much attention to the things you maybe were told you should do or that would be useful. We're all, unique individuals, and uh, at least in my zone, that seems to be where a lot of my value is. I think if I were to advise a younger me about trying to be a professional harmonica player, I probably would say, well, I don't know about that. That's not a lot of job opportunities for you there. You probably shouldn't do that, is probably what I would say. But, kind of like leaning into these things that you're excited about are going to be inspired to see how far you can go with, whatever that is. I think there's a lot of value in that. And that's something I've learned to trust about myself over the years that I think, was a bit of a roadblock earlier on, because as I moved through education and early work opportunities, I kind of felt like I wanted to try to be good at everything, and yeah. So um, that's one thought about personal growth affecting music in a positive way for me. I think for other guys it could be different, but
I'm with you, and I think that is a if you're growing older in a good way, I mean, I think in a good way, that's what starts becoming more clear. For me, the last year or two, I guess, I've been kind of um, stilling my environment and emptying out everything from literally cleaning up my physical space, throwing things out, putting things in order, to relationships, kind of, okay, I don't need to have a deeper relationship with this person, and I do with this person. And also music too. It reflects that state of mind reflects in the music, probably in other things too. and I feel really good about it. It feels great, you know.
that's another thing. I think maybe some musicians really thrive when they are feeling crappy about life in the world. That might be when they generate a lot of their best work. For me, that's I just feel crappy. And that's it's more of a spiraling into not feeling like doing much, not maybe practicing, not writing. So I would say that's something I've certainly had to observe about myself over time. I mean, I feel like I've even witnessed musicians who are sort of like gluttons for that kind of thing. They kind of look for those opportunities because it feels like a source of inspiration for them, or they
Yeah.
feel they want to try this drug or that drug, or get into altered spaces to be creative. And I think for me, um, all of those things, as I have gotten older, I have definitely figured out what I enjoy about life and what I am comfortable with, and have care less about what people tell me I should or shouldn't be. And that is certainly a growing pain that has just sort of evolved over time. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you playing this video.
No, I mean, it's pretty cool. I like it. I like what happened. I'm just looking for my other, where was I playing you? Oh, wow. I'm going to find it in a minute. Is this it? No, that is totally not it. Let's see. Ah, here we are. Okay, so now I have to just share the screen. Hold on. Okay. This actually is pretty short, but maybe there's more along here. Let's see. YouTube, get bigger.
Kathy, this is going back to me, trying to be effective, So 45 seconds is that's about where I maxed out at that time.
Are all of these at the bottom? These are more.
I mean, those are all like full length things that you see those thumbnails of, but I don't know that any of them like really feature the playing much, if that's what you're after.
Like the Woody Guthrie. Oh, don't let me forget to ask you about the Bob Dylan, but I want to play this first. So one of
Yeah,
these,
yeah.
like the warehouse session or
I
moment.
mean, probably the best one for, just me is this one you've got queued up, I would say.
All right, let's
Um,
let's go for it.
yeah.
Whoops.
A quick way to shrink mouth wrinkles
Oh
and
my
make them
God,
vent.
I really didn't want to do that. And furthermore, for I actually pay for not showing on YouTube, so I don't really understand why that happens. Anyway, this bigger, and then there we go. Very cool. Okay, now a lot of people, I'm sure, will want to actually hear about this. You played the movie, the new Dylan movie.
I did, yeah.
Did you play all through it, or was there a harmonica player that you were playing, or what was it?
Well, Bob Dylan is to me probably the most famous harmonica player, most iconic, I mean, he's obviously thought of a lot as a singer-songwriter and poet and icon, but I think in the harmonica world, that vision of Dylan with the harmonica and a rack, um, is probably the artist I can think of that is most associated, at least in a wider cultural way, with the harmonica. Yeah, because like Stevie Wonder, obviously an incredible musician who plays the crap out of the harmonica, but it's not like in his face in the way that it did Dylan. Even when he's singing, it's just right there, and there's a signature Bob Dylan harmonica and all that kind of thing. So yeah, so it's a movie that focuses on the early era of his life, up until the mid 60s when he went electric. So that's the era where he was, I think, almost exclusively or primarily playing solo. And so it's a ton of harmonica solos. He played a lot of harmonica in that era. And so I did, yeah, and they put a lot of his music in the film, but new versions. The actors sang all of the music in the production. They didn't use any original recordings, and so yeah, I think I probably recorded something like 30 to 40 Dylan songs.
Wow.
Had to transcribe them. Some
Wow.
of them we did like a live version for a club scene, for example, and then the studio version for when he recorded it in the studio. Sometimes we compared multiple live versions of the same song. A lot of them I transcribed. I think all of them I pretty much, at least at some point in the process, fully transcribed to the best of my ability what he played. On some of the things that were like a live club scene or that kind of thing, wasn't the iconic studio recording version. Some of those we, improvised and tried different things that weren't transcription based, but kind of in the style of, to see what we could do. Some pieces we extended what he did longer. So it was a really multi-faceted, varied experience. I recorded everything, or I recorded most of it, as far as I know, before they started filming. So they had it to work with while they were filming. Then we did a set of revisions while they were filming. I guess certain scenes ended up wanting to play longer, or that kind of thing, than they originally imagined. So some stuff got changed then, and we did a round of revisions after they filmed, based on maybe something didn't quite look right with what we had recorded with what you saw in the
Yeah.
video.
Yeah.
So I did that, and so I don't really know how it all shakes out there, but I mean, I put in a ton of time on that project. I also taught the actor, Timothy Chalamet, maybe a half dozen lessons on harmonica. Yeah, and I think there's some amount of the music that he, or at least on screen, I'm not sure about on the soundtrack. I don't really know. There's some amount of the harmonica that I think probably the Timothy um, did play himself on screen. I'm not sure how much of that he did. And he also, they filmed in New York, so they had a coach there, to help with the harmonica, there. And I believe that musician, Rob Paparazzi, great player, may have recorded a few of the revisions of scenes, that got changed as well. It's a little hard for me to know who did what, because I guess we're all kind of trying to sound like Dylan. So when I saw the movie, I was like, this is awesome. This sounds great. Couldn't, I remember recording all of these songs. I don't exactly know what I'm listening to, but I remember working on these for sure. So it was great. It was interesting. So Dylan, I think as a result of doing that, I want to say put in 150 hours or more on the project. It was a lot, like, transcribing, recording
Yeah.
30 or 40 songs, doing revisions on some of them, doing the lessons. I realized I sort of, probably more than any other harmonica player, have done my deepest dive on his playing. And so that was an interesting experience, because it was kind of down to like where I was trying to get his tone. I was trying to get all of the nuances so that it was believable, in some ways, see how I could be expressive or unique within that a little bit, but definitely a deep dive into how to sound pretty much like him. And I don't know that I had really ever done that with any of my favorite players, which was certainly humbling to realize.
You must have, I can imagine when you got a call or something or an email or are you available for this? You must have yeah, you must have gotten excited over that. What a cool
Yeah, I mean,
project.
yeah, I mean, for me, I have definitely been really lucky to do a lot of film work in recent years, and I would say that's a good portion of the highest profile projects I've gotten to done are, big films. I've gotten to work on some big records, Beyonce's latest record and Bon Iver and Kesha, but I feel like records, like at least records on that kind of level of fame, are pretty rare for me. They happen, but films are definitely where I've had the opportunity to work on really big projects and see how those are operating. And that one, for a variety of reasons, definitely feels like it will be a career highlight, the sort of most iconic harmonica player I can think of. For non-harmonica audiences, Dylan is not overwhelmingly loved by the harmonica community, but outside of that, I would say he is the man. And so getting to do that, and a lot of times on films, it's really not about my ego and how I feel about me on the scores. But a lot of times, at best, it's subliminal. If I were to watch the movie, trying to pick out the harmonica can be, um, it's subtle at best. Whereas in this film, it's the lead
Yeah.
actor blasting harp right in your face, and
Yeah.
so it's cool to just kind of see. It's cool for a variety of reasons,
Yeah.
I really loved that project, and I learned a lot that feels like invaluable musical lessons that I kind of feel embarrassed for sort of having slept on, as a player.
Do you have a bucket list?
Of like in my life,
Yeah.
I don't. I don't have a bucket list. I have things I'd like to try to do in the next little bit, but I don't know that I like a.
Like a long-term goal or something.
I kind of enjoy just doing what I'm doing. Like I can't even think of like if you said like what would be something really exciting for you to do next week. I don't have anything on my mind I've been having a good time just doing what I'm doing.
You're in the moment. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I guess that's the current bucket list is to, remain employed. It's not to be taken for granted, and try to stay healthy, remain employed, keep having a good time, making music with friends, and you know,
Yeah. What kind of live performances are you doing?
um, the last couple years, I want to say, or at least last 2023. I think most of my live performances were on tour with Ben Folds. I got to spend probably close to a month making the record he was touring at that time, and we did kind of three tours, East Coast, West Coast, and the UK.
I'm sorry, but I don't know Ben Folds.
Yeah, he's to me the premier piano rocker of the late 90s, early 2000s, just a brilliant musician. He may have crossed your radar. He did a big a cappella project at one point that you may have
Huh.
uh, encountered. But yeah, he's just a really incredible musician. He was one of my favorite guys, actually. Before I even had the opportunity to work with him, he kind of just set a super high bar for me along the lines. I think he must be roughly a contemporary of Elliott Smith. And they, to me, were two guys that were great songwriters, who also just created music that I was really excited about in terms of the intricacies and the arrangements and the recording, and just kind of being this complete package that satisfied kind of at that time my growing interest in singer-songwriter and pop and that kind of stuff, but also musically felt as satisfying as the kind of more heady jazz and classical music that I had, kind of up through, high school and college pretty much been focused on. So yeah, so that was kind of that year. And last year, I don't really remember. I think just, I did some random one-offs with Ben. I've been playing a little bit. One of my neighbors is a incredible blues guitar player, Nathan James. He actually played with pretty much most of my favorite blues harmonica players that were alive within his lifespan. So that's been really fun for me. I love blues harmonica. That's kind of how I got into it. But I wouldn't consider myself a blues musician, and I never really got to play like a real blues gig, I don't think, with great guy. That was the style where the harmonica for me really like was as important as any other instrument. And, if there ever was a Hendrix of harmonica, it was in the blues idiom, like somebody super important. And so that was my favorite stuff growing up. So been playing with him a little bit, just kind of mostly just locally. And recently, I guess I did some dates with an awesome band that actually is kind of historically significant from the harmonica's perspective. Hot Tuna. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
Sounds familiar.
They're an offshoot of Jefferson Airplane,
Oh,
and
okay.
kind of like I want to loosely describe them as like a folk revival, acoustic, jammy, Grateful Dead kind of inspired, but like just a so that is kind of what I've been up to or have on the docket for this month for live gigs.
That's
And
fun.
that, that
I'm
that's been a
actually an old
blast for me.
head, so Jefferson
Yeah,
Airplane,
I mean,
Grateful Dead. Yeah, that was part of my hanging in college.
that's been one of my most fun gigs because it's like just blowing the whole time. For me, that's pretty rare that I have had like at least theater gigs that aren't, like kind of, and tours, that paid and stuff where that was, it was that much fun of just playing and stretching out and making me feel like I need to be on top of my game for in that way.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if probably not playing live as much as I once did. COVID definitely like reshaped the amount of live playing I've been doing. So in recent times, mostly like little tours, kind of one-off, maybe private events, sometimes like just local clubs and bars if it's the right situation, and trying to play some concerts under the Magnetic Vines name or my own a little bit, and just kind of getting my feet wet with that. I haven't tried doing that in recent times at all, and I really have had a great time the couple times I've been putting on my own concert in the last couple months.
Yeah. Um, yeah, my friend Roland said, Hot Tuna is still around.
And sounding great, I should say, and on top of it, and delightful, inspiring guys.
And where are they playing in LA?
Uh, I don't have any dates with them in LA. I think my next run is like Florida, Atlanta, Nashville, kind of East Coast,
Yeah,
maybe into the Carolinas, something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, and last month was East Coast too. I think Boston and Connecticut, and yeah. So I played on the bass player Jack. I played on his record. He made a record that I don't think's been released yet, a couple years ago,
Yeah.
and we had a really great time. And so last month was the first time that they had got me on their gigs, and it went well, and they invited me for some more dates and stuff. So I don't actually totally know what their their touring
I'm
looks
just
like,
curious. I'm
but
curious. Do you ever play with Carrie Frank? Because he does some of those types of gigs too on organ and some on
I
piano,
know
but organ.
Carrie, and I consider him a friend. He's more of a casual acquaintance that I'm friendly with. I don't think I've ever actually played a gig with him, but I know he's pretty good friends with a number of my friends, and he you know I think I've hit him up with organ questions. At one point in time I had a gig kind of as I think I thought it was going to be as an organ player. Luckily, it turned out to not be that. I was replacing an organ player in an organ trio, the singer Mark Cohn.
Oh yeah,
I
Mark.
don't know if you know him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he goes out organ trio, and so I think last year actually, um, or maybe it was the year before. They run together, but anyway, I sort of replaced this incredible organ player, Glenn Pacha, um, and I was like pretty concerned that it was going to have to be organ because I love the organ, but it's a whole thing that I don't really know too much about.
Yeah.
And so I remember kind of hitting Joe Bag and
Yeah.
maybe Carrie up as well for some tips. Luckily, I kind of lucked out, and Mark was cool with just you know piano and harmonica, and we
Yeah.
just kind of didn't do what they were doing before. But yeah, I would love to play with Carrie,
Yeah,
but
I
I don't
think you
think I've had
guys
the
would.
opportunity.
I think you guys would go good together. I know Carrie's
I'm almost certain we've recorded together,
really.
and but not at the same time. I mean, he seems like he's on tons of things, and I feel like I remember that happening.
There was a last month or the month before. There's this group. These two musicians. One is an organ player, and one is is he a guitar player. And I can't remember their names because I this was the first time that I had known of them. But they have been they've started a jazz series at the Hotel Cafe, and it's this like
Okay.
one night of five different groups, and all like good groups, people who'd play at the Blue Whale and that kind of stuff. And the night I went, it's like five different groups, so it's long, you know, and it was the B3 night. They were featuring B3. So Carrie was there, Larry Goldings was there, even Josh Nelson, who said, I am really not a B3 player, but I mean, he's a great player and he has familiarity with the B3, so it sounded fine. And then, like I said, one of the founders of this was a B3 player, really good, and I do not remember his name, but it was it was really cool to see, all these little groups that had featured the B3, and carries a mofo on the B3. He used to have this
Sure, yeah.
steady gig at the Three Clubs, that place in Hollywood.
I never went there, but I remember he had a steady there.
Yeah, and
And he
that
plays
was
on at least one of your albums, right?
yeah, he does. He did one of my favorite arrangements of "Make Me Want to Holler," you know.
Right.
Yeah, and yeah, so that was the last record I put out, Social Anthems Volume 2, was like with Will Brom and Alex Bonham and Steve Haas and Nick Mancini, and then we added a few other extra players as well. Um, but yeah, but that was one of my favorite arrangements. It was just so groovy. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and but he really plays the B3 like he
It,
plays his ass off.
it it's a specific art for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I also love all the weird old combo organs and things that are sort of adjacent to that, but I find them really fun and charming.
like what?
The Farfisa, oh, like Farfisa's Vox, like all those 60s, 70s
Yeah,
organs that aren't B3s, that aren't like associated with the church tradition
yeah.
or the blues in the same way. I love all that stuff.
You mentioned you mentioned a word in describing those kind of instruments, and Larry Goldings has a few instruments that are unusual. I don't know if you've seen him use it, but one is very small. It's like a keyboard about this size, and it has a really unique sound. And of course, he plays it great. Of course. Um, have you ever heard him or seen him on that?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm relatively familiar with his playing. He's is incredible. I've seen him with a variety. I mean, it seems like he is. in addition to being a premier pianist and organ player and just musical mind, it does seem like he has. I've met him before, but I've never really got to talk to him too much. But it seems like he certainly has interest in more esoteric instruments and,
Yeah, yeah.
knows instantly what to do with them. So I'm not sure exactly. I know I've seen him play, I think, melodica and definitely the pocket piano, which is this weird little synth. I mean, I know it makes sense, the real estate above the B3, you can put a thing or two there. Um, but I feel like I've seen him, man, bring a celeste to gigs, and he definitely is a rare guy in terms of being an elite artist and player, and also interested in all that weird stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's so quirky
And I
too.
love his, yeah, I love his, I'm forgetting the name of the album, but he put out a number of years ago a set of solo piano improvisations that I had the CD of and listened to a ton. I loved that project. I can't remember the name of it, but they were mostly miniatures, and that was really, blew my
Huh.
mind.
Yeah, I'm just looking. Oh, uh,
Yeah, I'll see if I
were
can
they
find that.
like, um, hmm,
Had a white cover, as I recall. You know, uh,
here's his Spotify area, but
it
he
might
probably,
be In My Room. That sounds familiar. I don't know if he has an album called that, but it was something like that, In My Room. But I feel like he also had an album called like The Front Room or something like that.
Larry
Let's
Golding.
see.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, he does that. Yeah, In My Room, 2011. Um, yeah, this is it. Yeah, really lovely. As I
I
recall
see.
from
Yeah.
the liner notes at that time, I think it was all.
Hmm.
Oh, see there, In My Room, and then I also had music from The Front Room, which he put out a couple of years later.
Oh, okay.
But In My Room is the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna go listen to that. And they're small, they're short, so they're short
And
versions.
I think they were all free improvisations or something. That's my recollection, but they don't sound that way, they sound
Yeah, he does do Take Me
uh
Out to the Ball Game. And Crawdaddy, I've heard him play before. It's one of his compositions, though. But,
okay, you know what? I might be wrong about it.
well, whatever. Um, so Magnetic Vines, too, your projects. It sounds interesting to me that you developed piano, uh, I don't know if you'd call them arrangements, but piano, you adapted from the guitar pieces to the piano. It sounds interesting. And Magnetic Vines, actually, I noticed on Magnetic Vines, one song had something like, what was it? It was like 4,000, yeah, almost 5,000 listens. And
Mm,
then, like Crystal Lattice, for instance, had no listens, but At Lake Slowly Freezing had almost 5,000 listens.
interesting. Yeah, I don't
It must have made it onto a playlist or something, right?
yeah, I feel like some people are listening to our music, but so few that like it is hard to know what tracks, in terms of like when you're judging between 1,000 listens and 5,000 listens, I
Yeah.
guess if it shows no listens, it means you have under 1,000, and then yeah, I guess yeah, I guess they must have made it onto some playlists or something that generated a couple more listens on the other ones, but obviously nothing generated tons of listens.
I don't know how people really concentrate on that stuff. I have no bandwidth for that. I mean, I'm interested when I see like Apple Music sends me, that in Osaka, I have 47 listens to this one song. That's interesting to me. And I go to Japan, and I would assume it's somehow connected. But I to really concentrate on that stuff. I'm good at certain business things, but that area is like that's just too. It's not in my bandwidth.
Yeah, we pretty much just try to focus on making the music. And I think we have an increasing interest in playing shows, which we hadn't really been doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the rest of it, uh, I at least don't put too much attention to. Obviously, I would love it if, you know, a billion people listen to that music, but I don't tend to think about it too much.
Yeah. Okay, Roland first said, "Have you met Hans Groiner?"
I've met his alter ego once or twice.
And also, I'll ask this for Roland because he usually, Roland, I'm surprised you haven't like brought up Frank Zappa. So, what do you think of Frank Zappa?
Uh, you know, I have listened to him and watched the documentary, and I certainly have followed a number of the players in his bands, and their solo endeavors, and I don't have like he and like Captain Beefheart, and you know that stuff is stuff that whenever I've listened to, I'm like, this is some interesting and not unrelatable music to me. I like a lot of it, but I haven't gone that deep
Yeah.
into it. And I certainly find him uh, enigmatic, captivating, and really interesting. But I haven't gone that deep into him. I've of course listened to him, but yeah.
Okay, Roland, don't say I didn't ask. um, I'm sure he didn't ask if you had played with him because you're not old enough, but many times he'll ask that question as well. Um,
I've played
so,
with people who have played with him.
okay, me too.
Yeah.
I think Chris Wappich did the Frank Zappa touring thing with, was it Frank's son or like, yeah, there was a whole thing where I think it was Chris Wabbich who had they rehearsed for 2 weeks, you know, like
Yeah.
heavy duty rehearsing and then on the road. So it's not super easy music. Anyway,
No.
so we're coming to the close of the show. Thanks for giving me 2 hours. It was really nice of you. And
Hey, thanks for having me.
see, I didn't even ask you once how you grew up or when you started playing or anything. It just very naturally unfolded. I love shows like that. I hate to go, and where did you grow? And when did you know?
Well, I haven't grown up yet, so
Oh, well,
it wasn't
that's
going to be a
why
good
I
answer to
wasn't,
it.
yeah, that's why I wasn't drawn into that. I look forward to this year in LA. I think it's going to be a special jazz um, expansion in LA, the Blue Whale, where you played during the walk around last month, and yeah, the Blue Whale, the Blue Note. Um, I feel like there's going to be more expansion this year in LA over jazz, which I'm really excited. And yeah, and so I'm feeling like we'll maybe hear more of you live.
I hope so. I hope so.
What was that little gig that you used to do, like when the Blue Whale was really happening? You used to do a steady, right, around near the Blue Whale.
Well, I mean, I remember playing the Blue Whale regularly, but not as a steady.
No, it was outside of the
Maybe,
Blue Whale, but it was in
oh,
that
maybe
general area.
7 grand. Maybe there was a whiskey bar that was a little, wasn't exactly in Little Tokyo, but wasn't
I
far,
noticed
seven
Seven
grand.
Grand. I don't think it was, I thought it was near the Blue Whale. Thought you were doing like a duo or, so
Oh, you
long
know what?
ago.
I play so a really good friend, actually my partner in the Magnetic Vines. He lived walking distance from there, and he booked like a ton of gigs, most of which were steady for him. That would all have been within a couple blocks. Like he played
That must have been.
so many different places. I mean, he would play like a madman, five, six, 7 gigs a week, all within like a 3 mile radius. Kind of, it was pretty amazing, actually. So I
Yeah,
would do those regularly with him, but not necessarily steadily. I would do them
yeah.
often. We did
I
play
think,
at, you know what? We did play at Demitas, that coffee shop that was right there for a little
yeah,
while.
yeah.
It wasn't super, I think it was probably a steady thing, but we didn't do it like all the time.
Yeah.
I don't, they weren't booking music. We just kind of played and they'd give us food and coffee, and it was a fun thing to do at Friday. I think at like 10 a.m. or something like that, we'd play for a couple hours. So maybe that is what you're thinking of.
Yeah, that was probably it. All
Yeah.
right, Ross Garren, thank you very much.
Thanks for
Um,
having me, Kathy. Appreciate it.
continued continued success to you. You
Appreciate it.
know,
Likewise.
thank you. Thanks. And for those of you who care, I'm going to be in New York this week at the Jazz Congress. So the next human that I am, as opposed to alien, that I'm interviewing will be on January 20th. That's in 2 weeks. That's going to be Joe Domino, who has he has his own interview show. I can't remember the name of it right this second, but I've been on it. A number of people have been on it. So anyway, going to interview him. So that's the next one, January 20th. And everybody out there, have a really good time. Have a great day. It's a beautiful day out in California. Get out there and walk around and breathe some good air. Okay,
All
Ross.
right. Hey,
Thanks.
thanks for having me, Kathy.
Bye,
Bye.
man.